Welcome to the Soft Matter Show. This is Amal Narayanan. I'm a chemist and a polymer scientist. In this podcast, we will talk about soft matter science and have fireside chats with the researchers. Please enjoy the show. In today's conversation, Dr. Elyse Ball joined me to discuss about the process of translating technologies developed in academic labs. Elyse is an extraordinary multitasker and detailed about the process of juggling between jobs such as assistant counsel at UARF, which is the University of Akron Research Foundation, and CFOs of various startups. This conversation further expanded to the exciting world of entrepreneurship in Ohio. Elyse has been leading NSF I-CORPs sites program, which I had completed twice for two different technologies we developed during my Ph.D. More importantly, in this conversation, Elyse talked about the reasons behind success and failure of startups, methods to find mentors, and various resources for student and faculty entrepreneurs. I had a fun time and hope you all enjoy this conversation. Let's start. Today we have Dr. Elyse Ball online. It is very hard to describe Elyse in a single line, but I'll try my best. Elyse is the assistant counsel and project manager at the University of Akron Research Foundation. At the same time, Elyse juggles the appointments between Akron as an innovations and eSense as their CFO. Elyse is an expert in technology licensing, and I'm super excited to dig deep into Elyse's thoughts on commercialization of lab-created technologies. Welcome to the Soft Matter Show, Elyse.
Hey, well, thanks. And thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you. So with the previous guests, like I have had Professor Abraham Joy, I have had Professor James Egan. They were more entitled to be the professor of the University of Akron. So but you have to juggle through a lot of positions and a lot of different roles every day. So I was wondering, how do you introduce yourself to someone you're meeting for the first time?
Yeah, that's always kind of difficult because I don't even feel like my job title maybe describes what I do. So I just tend to tell people that I'm somebody who's really passionate about bringing new technologies to market, and everything I do kind of revolves around that.
Yeah, that's amazing. So because you were able to, you are doing a part of University of Akron, and you're also working at the two startup companies I just mentioned. And how do you switch off and manage your time around it so that you can play these multiple roles at the same day?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that I try to do is when I'm working on one company or another, I'm really focused on them, and I'm trying to do whatever is best for them, right? So my lawyer hat on, I worry a little bit about sort of the conflict of interest of having all these different roles, and so I'm always really focused on, if I'm working on Akron Ascent Innovations, I'm focused solely on whatever's most beneficial for them. But then, in terms of managing time, it's just all about flexibility and juggling. And I think, probably Dr. Egan and Dr. Joy have a good bit of juggling to do as well. I mean, you always have those competing priorities. For a lot of the faculty, it's teaching and research and service. And in some cases, they have their own startups. So it's just about sort of putting focus on whoever has the biggest need at that moment and trying to make sure that I don't drop anything.
So do you do do you schedule like different days for like the different roles, or is it like you had to do everything all together on the same day?
I haven't scheduled different days for different companies. Back when I first started at UARF about 7 years ago, I used to do that, but I found in the startup world things shift so rapidly that doesn't really work, right? So like I could have my whole week beautifully laid out, and then something comes up on Thursday and a company really needs something done by Friday. So instead I just try to schedule kind of blocks of time, and I just look at one evening, I look at what needs to be done for the next day, and I kind of allocate my time almost one day at a time, just to essentially deal with the fact that the environment within a startup can literally change in like 24 hours, or the priority can change in 24 hours.
So one of the things that came across, like when I was talking to people, like before inviting people to the show, is that they are very enthusiastic about the time management, like the softwares or the apps that they use. So is there anything that you use, like probably something like a Basecamp? I know that you use probably Basecamp, but is there anything else other than Basecamp or the calendars that you use which helps you to multitask?
Yeah, so there are two apps that I really like. So I use Calendly, which I know you also use
Mm-hmm.
for scheduling, and I think that that's probably saved me on average like 15, 20 minutes a week when I would ordinarily be emailing back and forth just by letting people I know well put meetings directly on my calendar. And the other thing is I have this app on my phone, and it's literally just called Things 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are different versions of it, but it's based around the idea of getting things done, the GTD sort of concept. So that allows me to schedule a handful, typically 5 or 6 priorities for the day of like tasks I really want to get done or things I really want to get out of meetings. And then, sort of flow those over day to day and just really keep track of what my priorities are and keep the focus there every day.
What did you used to use before Things 3? Like, is there anything you used to use? I'm imagining that is a new app, like Things 3, I think. So, is there anything you used to use before that, or was it there from the day one?
That just replaced my old pen and paper task list. But the thing that's really nice about it is the pen and paper task list. It just seemed like a waste to rewrite things every few days. So this has been really nice because I can put something on that I'm not going to need to do for 3 months, and
Mm-hmm.
it just pops up essentially the day I need to know, hey, this is going to be due tomorrow or whatever.
So, is there anything like why did you end up doing taking up a job which has multiple roles? Is there anything which you had it in your mind from in the beginning of your career itself that you wanted to do multiple jobs at the same time, or is it like something you ended up doing?
So I started at UARF, the University of Akron Research Foundation, before I went to law school. And I actually took the job then because I knew I wanted to go to law school and I wanted to experience a bunch of different aspects of law, right? So we do contract law, but we also um, own some real estate, so we do lease agreements, and we also interact with patents and trademarks. So I thought, well, that'll be really cool to get that variety. And then I just loved it so much that when I got done with law school, I was like, that's what I really want to do. So I was just looking for jobs like this, and thankfully a position actually reopened, my previous office, just a slightly different role. So it was like fate, I guess.
Yeah, that is exciting because this is like the perfect time to take a segue into your education journey. Because I was wondering, like, you did your JD from Boston University, and you have your bachelor's in journalism, if I'm right. So, what inspired you to take journalism? And how did you transform yourself from a journalism career towards a more of a JD kind of career path?
Yeah, so I did a degree in journalism just because I loved writing. So in high school, I loved to write, and I thought, well, what's a job where I can get paid for writing, and it's going to at least be, semi consistent work, right? That rather than being a novelist, I probably don't have the creativity for it. So that's what got me started in journalism, and then I think I just had talked to. Other people in my life who were lawyers, and I thought that what they did seemed really cool. And I felt like the journalism degree actually, strangely, it sounds like a weird background, but it prepared me really well for both law school and for the job that I do now, because journalism really taught me two critical skills. One is how to interview people, which is helpful if you're a lawyer, right? And you're interviewing clients. It's also helpful in my current role because a huge central part of what the University of Akron Research Foundation does around startups is customer discovery, which is all about interviewing customers to understand their needs and their problems. And the other thing with journalism is it taught me how to write really fast, which is helpful in law school because there's a lot of writing. It's also helpful in my current job just because one of the things that you always need to be doing is if you're working with startups or diverse backgrounds, it's just purely communication. So making sure that everybody knows what's going on, everybody's on the same page. So, I think that ability to learn how to write fast. I always say journalists might not always be trained to write the best, but they write quickly, right? You're used to writing to a deadline. So I've just found those skills to be useful. But if you had put me where I was today and asked me, what the perfect undergrad degree would have been, I don't know that I would have predicted journalism to be so useful, but it has been.
So did you do any internships or anything in between that prepared you to go to the law school?
So I did work at the UA Research Foundation before law school, and then during law school, I had a few different internships. Two of the most memorable of which were both around healthcare law. So I did an internship related with an organization called Healthcare for All that did lobbying around essentially a lot of the healthcare law that is now what we would call Obamacare, but Massachusetts had a similar version of that law they called Romney Care that was lobbied for in the Boston area. So I was part of the organization that sort of wrote up memos on how that law actually ought to be implemented in practice once it had been passed. And then I took on a similar role in the Akron area working for Community Legal Aid in their healthcare advocacy group. And there I did a lot more hands-on work with individual clients around sort of specific healthcare needs, particularly for populations, where they maybe it's a little bit harder for them to access the healthcare system or to get access to things like individualized educational plans and things like that.
So how did that transformation occur? From what you just explained is that you have done a lot of internship and a lot of work in changing the law and bills, and more on the current population or the people around the world, so around the US. So how did that transformation from working on the problems in the civilian side more inspired you to start or transform yourself into more of a technology licensing person?
Yeah, I don't know if there wasn't really a plan there or anything. It's just things that are interesting to me. So I think probably it's just the intersection of different industries. So whether it's the intersection of business and technology or law and healthcare, I think that all of that has just been really interesting to me to see how so many of the startups that come out of University of Akron are healthcare related. So slightly different areas of law, but I think it's just that sort of intersection of a few different fields with doctors and lawyers working together, or PhDs and things like chemistry and polymer science working together with people on the business side. It's just really interesting to me.
So you always had an interest in terms of working in the healthcare sector. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, so I have somewhat of a background in healthcare. Both of my parents were in the healthcare sector. So my dad's a doctor, my mom's a pharmacist. And so I think I was just always very aware of that sector. And, like I said, I mean, that's a great field for innovation. So I just think I've always worked at sort of the intersections of different fields and just somehow wound my way into where I am today.
Yeah, that's nice. That's exciting because your parents have sort of exposed you to the healthcare system. Then, yeah, it's nice actually, because, I mean, is there a pressure of a parent being a doctor and you had to be a doctor?
No, I think my dad would have loved that, but I think it was pretty clear from when I was relatively younger that probably wasn't going to happen. So yeah, my brother and I just have one brother. Neither of us followed in their footsteps, but I think they're pretty happy with where we wound up anyways.
That's nice. So what inspired you to come back to Akron? So because you were in Boston, that's like an exciting place for technology translation in the healthcare industry itself. What inspired you to move back to Ohio or even Akron in terms of the technology transfer aspect of it?
I mean, so Akron has always felt like home to me.
Mm-hmm.
I know, Jeff Hoffman, who used to work at the University of Akron, used to say that he liked Akron because it was small enough that you could make a difference, but big enough to matter. Mm-hmm. So it was sort of this idea that, even relatively young professionals in the Akron area could really get involved at really high levels in the community. Mm-hmm. And, it's a city that's large enough that if you have that impact, it really makes a difference in a lot of people's lives, because it's just, it's kind of the perfect size city, I think, for somebody who just likes to get involved in a lot of things.
Can you explain a little bit about the UARF that you like? You work with the UARF quite a lot, and can you like explain a little bit about what are the activities that University of Akron Research Foundation, which is the UARF, involved with?
Yeah, so the University of Akron Research Foundation was founded before I was here. It was founded about 20 years ago. And early on, it was really just a technology licensing arm for the University of Akron. So it's basically set up to facilitate quicker licensing of technologies that were being developed in the University of Akron labs. Like it was a small group of people that could make decisions really quickly rather than, sort of traditional university bureaucracy. And then over time, it just sort of started to grow. By both adding staff, and then we have this wonderful group of mentors that are affiliated with the research foundation, some of whom are designated UARF senior fellows. And these are by and large people who have worked an entire career in industry. So they might have worked for somewhere like Goodyear or Exxon in a sort of VP of research or VP of innovation role and wanted to stay involved. And so they sort of help, bridge the gap between industry and the university. But with this group sort of coming together of staff and volunteers, the organization has sort of taken on a life of its own. So, when I first joined UARF, we were doing licensing and we did some work with startups. But then about a year after I joined, we got an I-CORPs site, which is a National Science Foundation program all about understanding market needs so that you could translate technology into products and services that will help people and will solve problems. And through that, I think the entrepreneurship aspect of things just absolutely took off because we got really skilled in that space, and so we started to get more involved with technology startups of all kinds, regardless of whether they were University of Akron specific.
So you have been running I-CORPs for how long?
I think this is our 8th year.
Oh,
so we started in fall of
congratulations.
2013, 8th year, yeah.
So can you explain? I have been a part of the NSF I-CORPs for twice actually. I took once in a summer, and I have done that course again in my in the winter following up in the same year in 2018. Yeah. So can you explain to people who doesn't know anything about I-CORPs? Can you explain what NSF I-CORPs do?
Yeah, so NSF I-Corps is all about sort of taking people like you, Amal, students, Ph.D. students, master students, faculty, and helping them sort of understand how they can build their technology to serve a customer need. So it's really all about taking some time off from being in the lab, getting out of the lab, getting out of the building, and talking to people that you think might be customers about their wants and needs. So we ask them questions about the biggest problems they have or how they complete a process today, what problems keep them up at night, those kinds of things, to try to make sure that the product or service we're building using technology precisely meets that customer need. So rather than being something that might be kind of nice to have or a little bit beneficial, the goal is to really understand the customer so well that you can build a product that's sort of perfectly tailored to what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, it was an exciting platform actually. I'll just provide my feedback here, like saying that I had taken it twice. Once in a summer that is more intense than the winter one. So these I-CORPs offers courses for young entrepreneurs to identify the real life problems that happens and relate that to your research, and you sort of get an exposure to the real life problems, which is very unlikely to hear from unless you go and ask the customers. So it was an eye-opening experience for me, because in the lab, we work on a lot of things. We try to create the technology, and we always think that this is the best thing you can ever create. Then you go and talk to the customers, and most of the time, they don't need anything like that. So it was an eye-opening experience, and you have, any PhD student, I strongly recommend that most PhD students or postdocs or people who works on the problems which you think are real life, have a significance in real life, should take that course. So how is this funded? What is the funding mechanism of UARF and the NSF I-CORPs?
So the NSF I-Corps program that we run is specifically funded by 3 organizations. So it's funded primarily by the National Science Foundation, but we also allow teams from sort of the broader community that have technology ideas to come in too. And that activity is funded by the Burton D. Morgan Foundation and the Ohio Third Frontier. So we have 3 sources of funding for that program. And then, more broadly for the Research Foundation, we get a lot of our funding from Ohio Third Frontier, which is sort of funding entrepreneurship support activities. So organizations like UARF that support entrepreneurs get funding. But then we also receive funding through a portion of licensing revenues that come in and pass through to the University of Akron, as well as we run some special projects. So we have a special project in the agricultural technology space, and we have a special project, sort of an institute for training polymer technicians that we work on as well.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, I did not know about that agricultural aspect of it actually. So, what is like? I mean, I am imagining that the UARF is actually pretty big for the size of the university or for the space of place like Akron. So, I was wondering, is there anything unique about Northeast Ohio or Akron that helps it to form such a wide pool of entrepreneurs?
I mean, I think for Northeast Ohio generally, and probably Akron specifically, right, we have this great tradition of entrepreneurship. So you think about, the tire companies from 100 years ago, and then you think about companies like Gojo and things like that that have been homegrown in Akron. So I think there is a wonderful tradition across Ohio of innovation and entrepreneurship. So I think that's a really good thing to build on. I think that, like I said, one of our supporters is Ohio Third Frontier, which is a state organization. And I think it probably wouldn't have been created in any other state except Ohio, because Ohio Third Frontier was sort of created because people felt so strongly about Ohio's history of innovation and entrepreneurship that they felt like, well, we need to continue to be at the forefront of that. So I think part of it is just the culture of innovation and entrepreneurship. I think the culture of building things and making things, right? That's one of the things I also love about Akron and the startups in the Akron area is so many of them are physical products. Like software is fun, but it's also, I think atypical probably how many of our startups build things and make things and are based around, chemistry or electrical engineering or whatever. Yeah. And then I also think just in Northeast Ohio, there's wonderful collaboration. So that helps a lot too.
So you mean the collaborations across the industry and the universities? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I mean, I just think people are quite willing to help each other out. So industry, university, but also the hospitals, I think, are wonderful collaborators, and government, I think, tries to support that.
Yeah, that's great to learn. Actually, I did not know about the government's aspect into this. So, what are some of the recent startups that you recently worked with? So, I'm trying to segue into the more exciting part of this talk. I think is more about what are the recent startups that you work with, and what are the ideas they have brought in, and which among those you think is gonna, or can you give some examples of some of the startups that's gonna do great, which is budded from the UARF?
Yeah, I would love to give examples. I feel like I'm probably not well positioned to say who's going to do great, because I think everybody is. Mm-hmm. That's part of what I think helps all of us is just this sort of constant enthusiasm for new ideas. Mm-hmm. But you listed a couple of the startups that I'm involved in. So one of the ones that's been around for like 7 years now is Akron Ascent Innovations, which it has a nanofiber adhesive technology that allows it to have really strong grip strength in one direction, but then peel off relatively easily. So I've always been excited about that one. I think it's been a great lesson for me in the fact that we always are aiming to get, the company to the point where it can exit in like 5 years. And like I said, it's been 7. I think they've formed some really great strategic partnerships that are very exciting with large companies that can help them bring product to market more effectively. But that one's been a great lesson just in the fact that sometimes you just have to stick with it and work a little bit longer and a little bit harder than you were thinking you would to get the product to market. But then there's a ton of other exciting younger startups. There's one that I've been working with quite a lot lately that is out of chemical engineering that has a technology that can differentiate between sort of regular corrosion and corrosion that's being caused by microbial activity, particularly in things like oil and gas pipelines. Like that's a big deal to know whether you need to treat for microorganisms because they're causing the corrosion or they're just present in there but not really causing corrosion. So you don't really have to treat the same way. So I think that one's really exciting. I think there are a few out of polymer science that I always get really excited about. One is an adhesive, and I think it's actually I know one of your colleagues in Joy Lab, an adhesive that releases upon the application of light. Very exciting for medical settings, particularly things like negative pressure.
Right? I'm very familiar with
Polylux.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So do you see any among these startups that you're told you're told about the Akron as an innovation? I didn't catch the name of the second. What is the name of the second one? Is there a name for that?
It's MIC Monitor.
Okay, yeah. MIC monitors and MIC me. Okay, it makes sense. So the third one is the Polylux. Do you see anything in common across these startups, which makes them puts them in the right place?
Yeah. So one thing, not to overly plug the I-Corp program, right? But one thing that's great about all these companies is they've been through the I-Corp program. They've been through intensive versions of the I-Corp program where they've talked to more than 100 potential customers for their product. So I feel like they're in a really good position in terms of understanding their market very well and what they need to build. I also think they have really strong technical background on the team, which is also really important. So I think it's probably the marriage of understanding the market and then having the technical know-how to sort of build what needs to be built.
Is there any other companies you wanted to add to the list? Like, I think I cut you off in the previous question.
Oh no, I mean I could go on for hours. But
so the next part, I mean, in the same way, in the same line, if I ask what are some of the common mistakes that startups do, which puts them not in the right place?
Yeah, so I think the biggest overarching thing is the sort of myth of if you build it, they will come, right? So it's startups that build without talking to their customer, without iterating with their customer. So, one other common thread through those startups and others I've seen that have been really successful is them showing data to their potential customers, bringing prototypes to their potential customers. So they actually see their customers interacting with the product and they understand what might be improved and how the customer is using the product. And then I think, further downstream, right, most of these companies are not quite at that point yet, but understanding that even though social media exists and even though there are these occasional viral sensations, most of those are a lot of hard work to become an overnight success, so that you have to, again, understand your market, bring on team members that know how to do sales and marketing so that you're getting the word out there about what you're doing and why it matters to people.
Mm-hmm. So it's more like a customer discovery phase, which you believe to be the most important part of the starting a new company. So
yeah, I mean, there are a billion mistakes you can make when starting a company, but that, to me, that's the foundation. If you really truly understand your customer, you can overcome a lot of other mistakes.
So to the listeners, who are interested in starting a new company, or they have the entrepreneur spirit. So one of the things I always puzzled is what are the right steps to take when you are starting or translating a technology developed in the lab to the commercial space?
So, I mean, one thing is to just get out there and get involved in things that push you outside of your comfort zone. So I'm assuming a lot of the listeners are probably people who have masters or are pursuing PhDs in technical fields. So, get out of that bubble to some extent, join programs, whether it's the I-Corp program or, if it's a meetup for startup founders, even if they're in completely different fields than you, right? One of the things you can do is just improve your sort of business acumen and learn from other people that have been there and done that. Another great thing I think that can be really important is to get a mentor, right? So find somebody who has been successful in your space, or somebody who has more of a business mindset, and learn from them.
Is there any tips from yourself to finding a mentor?
Yeah, I mean, I think, one thing is just once we're able to go to events again, going to events. But there are also different networks that can connect you to mentors. So here in Northeast Ohio, there's a mentorship program called I think it's called the Burton D. Morgan Mentoring Program. Um, Sometimes your school's alumni association can connect you to mentors. There's also a national network of mentors called SCORE, which is the Senior Council of Retired Executives, and you can go on their website and literally search for specific fields to find mentors. So there are a lot of different places that you can go. And one of the other things I guess I would say is like, be bold a little bit, be bold a lot, right? If you go to, for example, a talk and there's, somebody that you saw speak that you think would be a wonderful mentor, don't be afraid to connect to that person on LinkedIn, or if they shared their email address, to reach out to them and say, hey, can I have 15 or 20 minutes of your time to ask some questions about how you got where you were? Mm-hmm. People love to share their experiences. They love to help students and other young people who are just sort of coming up through the ranks. So you take advantage of that, and you can often start a mentoring relationship just by asking somebody to take a 20-minute video chat with you, or when things get a little more back to normal, meet up for coffee. And then do that a couple of times. And if the relationship seems great, then you can say, hey, I would like to formally ask if you would be a mentor for me. And, typically one of the best practices I've heard for working with a mentor is to actually be clear about what that means. So does that mean meeting up once a month for an hour to talk about things? What does mentoring mean to you? So to, have that sort of initial period where you talk to the person 2 or 3 times. And then if you feel like you click, you can sort of ask for a more formal mentoring relationship and explain what that means from your perspective.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I have found in that area is that like people, like in the first conversation itself, like some people tend to ask for the mentorship itself. I think that is not a great idea. The best idea would be to, ask simple questions initially. Then once you feel like you're comfortable with talking to that person, and that person is also more comfortable in talking with you, then it's a right time to ask for, will you be able to spare like 20 minutes per month, or like some kind of scheduling like that, so that you can work on their shoulder. So one of the things like I wanted to ask you, like, do you mentor a lot, or how many people do you mentor?
Yeah, I don't know how many people I formally mentor. I wouldn't have a great answer. Yeah. Maybe, at any given time, there may be half a dozen sort of startups that I'm quite involved with, where I would meet with them every week or two, and then there, are probably, 20 other groups that, pretty much if they called me out of the blue and asked for advice on something, or ask for half an hour of my time, I wouldn't hesitate to give it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's nice of you, actually. So when like, there are students who are trying to start companies, and there are professors who tries to start new companies. Do you think there's a right time for a PhD student or a professor to, start a company? Because like sometimes like they are in a hurry to get PhD or a master's, or at the same time for professors, they are in the process of getting the tenure. And so do you think there's a right time for the professor or the students to look forward to the entrepreneur aspect of their research?
I mean, there's never going to be a perfect or easy time to start a company, because it's just hard work. For faculty, I think it often revolves around, and should revolve around, things like tenure and promotion. So I know it's often easier for faculty, if they're making a big push to get tenure, to sort of wait until right after that to start a company, just based on timing. I think for PhD students, one thing I would recommend is, you think you might want to start a company, to participate in some kind of, business accelerator type training. So it could be something like I-Corps. It also could be one of these national things like Y Combinator Startup School, or, there are a ton of great opportunities if you just search online. People are quite comfortable now with doing these remotely. I know Polylux, the company we were talking about, participated in an accelerator in Germany remotely. I had to get up really early in the morning, but it was a great experience. But I would recommend participating in something like that, like probably somewhere around the third year, if you're in a 5-year Ph.D. process, right? Because you want to make sure you have most of your classes out of the way and you sort of understand your own research project and which direction it's likely to go pretty well. But, doing that earlier can be really helpful. And then I think, depending on your intention, there can be some real value in starting the company before you graduate, because that gives you an opportunity to, for example, write a grant proposal under one of the federal SBIR programs, which fund small businesses, or talk to some investors and kind of get funding lined up so that when you graduate, you're not then graduating and then spending 6 months trying to raise funding so that you can actually pay yourself. It's great to have that mostly lined up and to be confident you're going to be able to pay yourself when you work on the company.
Yeah, I can imagine I cannot imagine not getting paid when you are starting the company, right? So one of the things I wanted to ask in the similar direction is that, is there any difference when, when international students are often coming for PhD to the United States, and is there any difference or anything that you have an advice for international students when they are trying to go to the entrepreneur route?
Yeah, I mean, one thing would be find a good immigration attorney, right? Somebody that you trust, but that probably in most cases is not going to be so costly that you're like terrified to call them because you're going to get a huge bill. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely more challenging, right? I mean, it much like the funding thing, I think it's helpful if it's something that you think you want to do, to make that plan like a year or 18 months before you're going to graduate, that I'm probably going to do this, and start thinking about it then. Because there are a number of great visa options for people who are founding a company. And there are a lot of things that you can do, but it's a lot easier to do that if you've planned early.
Do you,
and one other thing.
Yeah, go ahead, please. Yeah.
And so one other thing that I would throw into the mix is we're talking a lot about founding companies. But if you're really interested in entrepreneurship and you're not comfortable doing that right now, another great thing you can do, again, going to some networking events, reaching out to offices like University of Akron Research Foundation on your own campus, to find out about what startups are already out there and try to get an internship. I know some graduate schools allow for 1 semester or 2 semesters of outside research, right? And that can, I believe, in most cases be with a startup company. So another option that you have is if you're really interested in starting a company, but you don't want to do it right when you graduate, you maybe want a little more security, would be to, look at the startup companies in your field or in your community and try to find one that really, really excites you and join that. And that experience, particularly if you make it clear to the CEO or CTO of that company that you want to start a company someday, you can get wonderful experience that will make you a much more successful founder by sort of working for a startup and then starting your own when you're maybe a little more confident and a little bit more financially secure.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because I mean, most of the big companies that are out there, I think the founders, like, it's not, most of the time it's not the first time they are trying to make a company. It's most of the time they are the second or third company which is more successful. So you are an extremely nice person. I have talked to you so many times. I have worked with you, and we had done some interviews as well. So is there anything which bumps you off when you're interacting with the students or professors when they are trying to, establish or translate their work into a commercial space?
I mean, I think the biggest thing for me is like people who don't reach out early, or who don't don't find a network of people to trust, right? I mean, founding a startup or commercializing a technology is really hard work. And trying to constantly put on like a face of perfection for every single group you interact with has to be exhausting. So that's one of the things that bums me out is like, I don't have to be that confidant for everybody that I interact with, but I like to know that, you know, startup founders or inventors have some people they can just be honest with, like, I'm having a really rough day. This particular maybe research plan that we had, we're now, you know, it's months behind schedule and we're having these problems. Like you need to find people you can talk with and have sounding boards, and you know, you need to have that sort of group of people that are going to support you essentially no matter what, and be honest with them, because I think the hardest thing as a founder is trying to go it alone.
So is there any like resources that you recommend for people to read before, like, you know, starting or while they are in the process of starting the company?
Yeah, so two of the books that I've read multiple times, they're not great to read straight through, but they're great to read sort of chunks here and there as it applies to you, are Disciplined Entrepreneurship, which is by a guy named Bill Olet, who was a deep technology startup founder out of MIT and a wonderful thinker on like what it takes to lay the foundation for a solid business. The other one is the Startup Owner's Manual by Steve Blank, which I mean is along the same lines of somebody who's been a successful startup founder multiple times and is kind of saying, here's what you should do, here's what you shouldn't do. And then beyond that, I think there's a lot of really inspiring stuff and a lot of wonderful podcasts out there. So that's something where you can just kind of find what speaks to you. And definitely I would recommend, if you're thinking about it, I mean, read about people, you know, who are willing, or listen to podcasts with people who are willing to you know, honestly share their experiences about what they went through.
Yeah, that is nice. I mean, I found like so many new podcasts and or even older podcasts which are focusing on the startups. I think there's something called How to Start a Startup or something in that line. So you are a prolific reader. That I think I got it from the piece that somebody has written about in the Cranes Cleveland. So what are the recently read books that you recommend people to like read?
Yeah, so the two sort of nonfiction books that I've read more recently is I read a book called Nudge, which is about a concept. It's about choice architecture, which is sort of this idea about, you know, the way that you lay things out or the way that you sort of design things will cause people to be more likely to make one choice versus another, which that's just something that was generally interesting to me. And I also read a book by Ben Horowitz, who's the co-founder of one of the largest VCs in the country, Andreessen Horowitz. But he was a 2 or 3 time startup founder and went through, I think, one of the toughest startup success stories I've ever read. And he wrote a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which in my mind, it started out a little bit slow, but as he got into it, it was a lot of really actionable advice and just an extraordinary story about, you know, how he kind of created success out of this situation that almost anybody would have said, oh, this is probably hopeless, but it just was sort of testament to tenacity and really creative thinking about how to tackle problems.
This sort of connects to, you know, the point I was talking before, that even people try to be successful in the entrepreneur scene, so they try to be more, they think that the first startup they're putting out is gonna be successful. So, but as you read more, you will start to understand that, like, I mean, and I'm sure that you definitely know about this, that the first or not the second company is probably not the most successful company that you're gonna start. But how do you, what do you think about that point? Like that, why does it happen that, like, you know, the companies that they are starting second or third is probably more successful than the first one?
I mean, I think it's probably a combination of experience and confidence. You know, I think in the startup space, there's no blueprint, right? It's not like a lot of corporate jobs where you come in and you get this process map of how you do what you do. Um, Everybody's going to do things a little bit differently, and you know, some of the books that I recommended try to lay out paths for sort of best practices of things you want to do to set a solid foundation for the business. But, at some point in time, you're going to run up against a problem that there's not an easy solution to. And I think people who founded a few different companies, or again, people who have, worked for a few different startups before starting their own venture, they just have more experience to draw on when it comes to that really tough, thorny problem that you need a creative solution to. They've just got more to draw on.
Yeah, that sounds fair. So I'm coming to the final question that I have. Is there anything that is in your not to-do list?
Not to-do list. Like for me personally, or for other people?
I mean, it's an open question. Like you can answer for other people as well.
Yeah. So I guess in my list of things I don't want to do, I think it's probably pretty clear from our discussion today, right? Like I don't want to have a sort of career that bores me in the sort of 9 to 5 exactly thing. I want to be constantly learning and sort of pushing myself. And I guess I would say something for me that I think is probably hopefully applicable to a lot of people is, to not be afraid of taking some risks and trying new things. So I'm constantly trying to remind myself, to your point, many people who have failed at their first startup are the ones that go on to be the most successful. So it's sort of this idea of framing everything as part of the journey and, not judging yourself too harshly because of one, success or one setback.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. So thank you so much for the time. I'm having so much fun. I had so much fun doing this, and it is very exciting to have you here. And I'm sure that we can do one more round when I have more and more questions about it. I mean, there's no end to the questions that I can ask about your expertise. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for doing this with me, and I hope you enjoyed what you did.
Hey, thank you for having me. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, thanks, Amal.
Yeah. That's it for today, guys. Thank you. See you next time. If you want to learn more about the Software Matter Show, go to thesoftmattershow.com. That is thesoftmattershow.com. Or you can write to me at Amal Narayanan at thesoftmattershow.com. Thank you, guys.